Hi, and welcome to Mother's Quest, a podcast for moms like me ready to live our own truly epic life. I'm Julie Neal, a life and leadership coach, community builder, writer, and mom to two high-energy boys who challenge me to grow into my best self. I'll be right there. Where was I? In the months leading up to a big milestone birthday, I decided it was time to stop sidelining my dreams and become the hero of my own journey. I knew I didn't want to do it alone, so I created this podcast to learn from other moms further ahead on their quest, so their words of wisdom and lessons learned could help light the way for mine. I created this podcast for myself, but I hope you'll come along with me and find some treasures of your own. Welcome to the first official episode of the Mother's Quest podcast. I'm so honored to bring you this conversation with Navjit Kandola. Navjit is a spiritual advisor, educator, filmmaker, full-time mom, and the director of the Nizhoni School for Global Consciousness. Navjit works with clients to heal subconscious wounds, release anxiety and strain, identify habits that spiral into negative behaviors, and unblock stagnant energy in relationships and projects. It felt right to have my first conversation on the podcast with Navjit because she was one of the first people I reached out to after I decided to launch Mother's Quest. I found her through Danielle Laporte's website. Danielle, another profoundly spiritual mother, is also an entrepreneur, author, and poet. She's a longtime friend of Navjit and refers to her as a masterful soul sister who is lucid as a diamond. I determined I needed some of that guidance and reached out to Navjit for a phone session. I proceeded to tell her about my desire to embark on my own hero's journey and all my hopes and dreams for Mother's Quest. She helped me think about the metaphor I was choosing and encouraged me to make it my own, to hold a vision for a journey that could include more connection and ease than the typical one found in epic stories. Those words stayed with me and have been a guide as I've gone through the ups and downs of birthing my new venture and laying a foundation for the Mother's Quest community. More recently, I reached out to Navjit again, distraught with fear and sadness in the wake of the election, and consumed by self-doubt in the days leading up to this podcast launch. I got to experience firsthand how Navjit's healing presence could help me tap into the wisdom of my inner child, a term she refers to in this interview. It was a powerful and transformative experience, and one that I wrote about the next day on a blog post that I will include in the show notes. I share all of this because this first conversation has a different tone than many of the episodes that follow. It's a deep dive into spirituality and consciousness, and if these are topics you don't typically gravitate to, I encourage you to stay with it. Navjit talks about being grateful for those magical moments when we're present and connected with ourselves, our children, and with nature. She shares how she lives her epic life when she can shift her mindset from a place of scarcity and stress to a place of openness and abundance. It feels like the world is a very different place than the one it was when Navjit and I first recorded this episode, but the concepts she talks about feel more needed and relevant than ever. I'm Julie Neal, and this is Mother's Quest. So Navjit, I am really excited to welcome you to the first episode of the Mother's Quest podcast. Thank you so much for being open to this conversation.
It's a wonderful privilege to be with you today, Julie.
Yay. So let's get straight rolling into this. I wanted to share my intention too for all of these conversations. And it's really that I'm on a quest as a mom to be the most present, engaged mom as I can be, but also to feel like I'm investing in the other parts of myself and making a difference beyond my family. And so as I set out to take it up a notch and live what I'm calling my epic life, I wanted to learn from other moms that I think have been on this path as well and may have some lessons learned to share with me. So I really want to hear your story and your wisdom and your lessons today and just benefit from all that I can take in that will help guide me.
Yeah, thank you. I would say that one of the greatest things that we can really connect to is being present to our own life. and that, before the judgment starts, before the life purpose conversation starts, if we can just in each moment just recognize what a powerful thing that is happening in the fact that we are in a body, we are alive, we are rising within the universe, that we are part of this huge, incredible story called the universe's story. And if you think back all the way back to Big Bang, to the first moment that eyes appeared on this planet, to the first time brains were formed, to the first time language happened, and that we have this huge history, and that we are part of this very incredible journey, and we are showing up as ourselves, I think is a powerful place to begin, because we are creation and creator at the same time. I know I'm starting off in a big epic way, but that's one of the things that makes my day, when I look outside my window, when I embrace my child, really just feel part of that long history and future that we are part of, that we are embraced because we are birthed and born, and we continue to do that, whether there's the thousands of millions of cells being born and grow and nourish us, or whether it's nature outside of us. We are nature, and I think that's something that has to be a feature of our consciousness as aware parents, as aware epic life living people, is our awareness and connection to the bigger whole that embraces us. Is that a good start?
It's a good start. It's a beautiful start. And I'll be real and acknowledge that these are concepts that I don't always think about in as a way. And I think one of your gifts, which we'll hear more about, is that you are such a spiritually grounded person. And so I think in a way it's fitting that the very first interview of this podcast series, it won't always be as grand and spiritual, but I think it's beautiful. And because I do feel like this is also a spiritual quest, it feels like the right place to start, actually. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to actually go back in time a little bit before we get into your present journey as a mom and what you have to share with us about that, to understand a little bit more about who you are, and like if you could share briefly what your childhood was like. Who were you as a child growing up? And I'm also really curious about who was the mother to you, and what gifts do you feel like you got from being mothered when you were a child?
I would say, when I think about my childhood, I'm sure this happens for a lot of people when they are asked that question, what was your childhood like? Who were you as a child? That there are a lot of images or feelings or memories that rise to the surface. And then what I find myself is trying to figure out, like, which memories, which child do I want to show up? Do I want to bring up the child on the inside who was curious, I was just thinking about this morning, like how trusting I was of life as a child. I really believed everything that everybody said. I believed that miracles were real. I believed that I could talk to the plants talked to me. I spoke to rocks. I spoke to rivers. I grew up in India, so I had tremendous opportunities just to be out in nature on a farm.
Wow.
And I remember sleeping under the stars every night and looking up at this great black, because we didn't really have electricity, at this great black, deep black expanse of sky with all these twinkling stars and the Milky Way. And I would imagine that the stars formed the bedposts of my bed that I was sleeping in. And I would imagine what that would be like looking down at me, or was I looking up at that? And then I would think, oh yeah, but the sky, is there another universe outside of the black sky that's white universe? And maybe there's a blue universe. I didn't think of the word universe, but I just thought of it outside of the blackness. And so I was a very magical thinking child, and I lived in that time of my life. And this is until about 5-6 years of age. I felt, and I truly believe this as a child, I lived in many dimensions at the same time. I thought there were more of me than just the one, that was in that child body. I experienced myself as a 20-year-old in Greece. I experienced myself as a man in Japan. I had all these kind of memories and experiences that were just kind of moving in and out. I was moving in and out of my body. I was moving in and out of these experiences. And I thought that was true for everybody until I began to discover that it wasn't. That's when I began to narrow in and try to figure out how can I make it in this life, and what I meant by this life, is stuff began to draw my attention, and my physical body safety survival conversations began to show up because of what was happening growing up in India, and then moving to England and back and forth. So there's all this other stuff that began to happen that made me kind of come into one reality. But I remember the moment when I made that decision to come into this one reality and push away all that other stuff. And I didn't begin to reconnect to the other worlds or other realities until into my late teens to early 20s, when it kind of burst. So that was my childhood. So I was a very magical, bright, awake. That's the other thing I would say about myself, is that I was awake. I was aware of people's feelings. I was aware of their behaviors. And I felt like I had intelligence, but I didn't know how to articulate what I knew. So I was waiting for language to develop and some maturity to happen to share some of the ideas and feelings that I had about myself, life, and what I thought were important values.
So, listening over here, I'm so curious, and we could actually probably do a whole podcast on what that was like. And I'm wondering, like, were those past lives you were experiencing? But I know our time today is precious, so we'll have to save that for a part two. But what influence do you think your own mother had on shaping who you are today?
So, when I was about 20-something, I wrote a poem called My Biochemical Mother. And in that poem, it's about how biochemistry so forms us. And I share this respectfully and being aware of my mother and her life. I felt that my mother experienced periods of depression, of extreme isolation. And so I think that biochemistry impacted me when I was in the womb. And so my biochemical mother is such an interesting conversation to have, because it forms how we are as women. It informs how we are as mothers. And so I feel, inherit some of those biochemical traits of maybe some of her feelings of disappointment, some of her feelings of depression, some of her feelings of high ambition. Those was like some of the landscape that I began to track. But on a more personal, emotional, like she's my mummy, she's my mama, that kind of level, I would say that my mom, she would lay her life for me. She's such an emotionally complex and rich person. And from her, I've learned the power of healing through food, through nutrition, through that sense of integrity. She has a tremendous amount of integrity. She's an entrepreneur. She's an empire maker who didn't get to build an empire. So it's really fascinating. I have a very complex, very rich, very deep relationship with her. And at times I have to kind of have an emotional distance from her, because I can easily drown in her world, because she has that kind of like a pull and a tide like the ocean. So I have to dry out a little bit from being around my mom. But she's a wonderful being, and she's a being who I'm grateful for, because I know that the karma and the destiny and the vibration I was bringing in through being me, I'm sure wasn't an easy task to be a mother with.
I really appreciate you sharing that. And now I'm wondering if we move into your present life as a mom, in what ways the gifts that she gave you with all the love and the challenges, how you brought that into your experience of becoming a mother yourself.
I wondered about, because I'd already written that poem about my biochemical mother. I wondered what kind of a biochemical mother I was going to be for my child. And so part of my decision right from the beginning was to really learn from my mother, learn from the work that I do with my clients. And one of the things that I notice when I'm working with my clients is that we oftentimes will go back into the childhood, to the source of certain hurts or wounds or places where they felt tremendous joy, to just kind of get a sense of how life has formed them from those first years. And one of the things that clients will oftentimes say is how much they needed to be seen, or they needed that love, or they needed that connection, and how oftentimes the parents were busy or they were in their own emotional story. And so that really informed me that, and my own childhood made me realize that I want to see my child, that when I look at him, I don't want to be thinking about other things. I want to look at him and see him and recognize his light, his vibration, that he is so bravely willing to inhabit in this lifetime. So that is one of the gifts that I feel I have taken from my mother and transformed it into something that I can give to my child. So seeing people is a huge thing, and that can happen through listening to them, or being an open heart for them. That is a gift that I would say that I gained from my mother, who couldn't always be that way with me. And I realized what the cost of it felt like, that I can now close that gap by giving that to my child and giving that to my mother, who actually needed to be seen and heard. And so it's a two-way process that's happening. And then somebody might say, well, what about you? What about the child in you that needed to be seen? Well, I get to see that myself by working with my inner child, listening to what I need and how I want to feel, and creating that. And that's kind of entering into that adult, elder consciousness. Sometimes our parents can't, no matter how much we tell them, this is what I need, can you please give me this? They just can't. They just don't have the bandwidth. They don't have the tools, and that's okay. And so at some point, we've just got to let that go. It didn't happen. I can't get it from there. So let me turn around and see, how can I nourish this body? How can I nourish this spirit? Now that I'm an adult, I can create these things for myself. What is it that I can do to come into wholeness, and in turn, create that for my child? So I would say the seeing him, the open arm, loving him every time he enters a room, just like Maya Angelou said, when they come into a room, just open joy. Here you are. What are you doing? How's it going? It's like that joy, that delight every time they come to you. If you can. Of course, I'm a mother. In reality, it doesn't happen every time.
Right.
But as many times, that's my kind of, that's the kind of way I want to approach him and be around him, that I'm delighted, I'm grateful, I'm joyous, I'm celebrating him. And it doesn't mean I don't correct him. It doesn't mean that he doesn't, he doesn't have to do his homework. All of those things go hand in hand, but my heart is always delighted, and I show that to him and I celebrate him.
That's amazing. I'm smiling as I'm listening to you, because this is the first time that my little guy, Jake, who's 4, is going to preschool full time. And so I've been dropping him off every day. But when I pick him up at the end of the day, he runs to me, the most intense joy. And it's like, Mom, like he's
exactly
so thrilled to see me.
Yes.
And I'm able to just reflect that also straight back to him. And
straight back.
Amazing embrace. And I know every day won't be like that, but most days since he started have been. And it's like this little moment that you just want to bottle up. But I think
it's easier when I pick him up from school, but it's harder when I'm in the day to day.
Yes.
I appreciate that reminder about just that first experience and feeling that they get from you.
Yes.
Before maybe you have to shift gears and move to something else. Stop in that moment. I love that. So I want to move a little bit into some more of who you are in the world and the ways in which you feel like you either have had moments of living an epic life or are currently living an epic life now. When you look back on your adult journey since you've been a mom, what are some of those moments where you feel like you were really stepping in to living a fullest life?
I just want to say, Julie, thank you so much for creating this podcast and asking these questions and framing the conversation in this way, because it's engaging me in a way that I really appreciate, because it's bringing values that I uphold in my life, and I really want to grow into those kinds of values. And those values are, as you described in the way that you broke down epic, first being engaged and mindful with your children, with your family, with yourself, and then passionate, purposeful, and so on, is that, the first engaged, that first letter of an epic life, being engaged, is one of the key places that I have found to be very invigorating, very liberating, because being engaged takes the pressure off trying to accomplish goals that become fulfilled later. If I am engaged in this moment fully, and I am in full connection to my heart, my spirit, then that fulfillment isn't waiting for a later day. It's happening right now. And when I'm engaged like that, what happens is that this huge well of gratitude and appreciation is just rippling around in my consciousness, so that I can sit or walk and I can feel that breeze washing over me. And it's incredible. Just the other day, I was going for a walk with my son and my husband, and we were talking about, he'd found this very little soft feather, and he was brushing it against his, oh no, it wasn't a feather, it was a butterfly. Oh, this is so magical. We were walking, and this butterfly was flying around, and I said to the butterfly, I said, please come to me. I said this out loud in front of him. I was like, please come to me. I'm juicy as a flower. I'm delicious as the sun. Just come sit with me. Come sit on my hand. And I held out my hand, and the butterfly wafted this way and that way and this way and that way, and then it came and landed on my hand.
Wow.
And you should have seen the delight of the squeal that came out of Leo's mouth.
And how old is Leo again? I'm trying
8.
to picture this.
He's 8. He's like, Mama, how did you do that? And I said, well, Leo, I just tuned in, and I became something that maybe the butterfly would want to be a part of. I said, I shifted my vibration to be delicious and delightful for the butterfly. You can do that too. You can move your body's vibration. Imagine what would the butterfly like, and really listen. So he did that, and guess what? The butterfly went to his hand, and the butterfly stayed on his hand as we were walking and hiking and crossing this, creek and rock over rocks and everything for at least 10 minutes, which is unheard of. And so
This sounds crazy.
Yeah. And so
amazing.
Yeah. So that's what makes an epic life. That kind of moment where we're all just glowing, where, nature meets magic. That butterfly didn't have to come sit on my hand, but the synchronicity of it, was it because I was vibrating? I feel yes. Some scientists might say no. It happened. All those possibilities converged, and that's being engaged. And that for me is passion and purpose. It's invigorating. It's connecting. It's all of these things in that moment. Now, in that experience, all my hours of working and striving to make a difference in the world, all of that didn't even feature. I was in pure epicness. Yeah, I was in epicness. And so that's what I would say is how I am focusing in my life. That is what is happening for me more and more. And that happens with me when I'm engaging with clients. It's happening with me when I'm, going for a walk. It's happening in my relationship. It's that willingness to be engaged, which then creates that gratitude, which creates these magical moments. And that's what I live for. I live for that. So if my work can help me to create that, if I can help a client create that in their life, then yes.
Can we talk a little bit about that? First of all, this is an amazing story. And there's a part of me, and maybe years ago I would have heard this and actually felt like it was outlandish or hard to believe. But I've had more and more experiences like that for myself, where you kind of take a leap of faith or something out there, and then you're almost completely taken aback at at it actually coming true for you. And so I'm becoming more and more of a believer, but there's still the little skeptic in me. And I imagine some people listening may be wondering, I'm wondering if you could translate that for people that are not magical, but for people that are not as magical as you, how might that show up in a more kind of grounded day-to-day way?
So great. Well, I think, it's just like if you were to say to somebody who's never driven a car, never seen a car, how magical and outlandish that idea is, right? It's because we're so used to certain technology, certain ideas that we just go, oh yeah, TV, internet, flying, moon, yeah, of course. But there are technologies within our consciousness, things we know intuitively, instinctively, that we feel in our bodies that have over time just been narrowed down. Just as I was saying at the beginning, when I was a child, I was a magical child. All these worlds and wonders existed, they coexisted. Well, I think for people, many people, they've learned to kind of narrow that consciousness to goals coming through physical action or mental activity, and it's hard to step outside of that. So the only way to step out of that is to have experience and to open the focus. So often we're so focused, and the more that we stay in that focus, the less bandwidth there is for joy, because joy is magic, right? What I would ask anybody is, what makes you go, oh my gosh, that's so great? Is it seeing a rainbow? Is it seeing a hummingbird? Is it seeing your child, achieve a goal? Whatever it is, that little bit of that, that's all I would say to anybody is amplify that in your life. So if that is for you seeing, as I said, a hummingbird, or having a butterfly land on your hand, or running that 5K for a charity event, whatever makes you go, wow, that's so cool, I love that.
And just really stop and notice it. And
Stop and notice it. See how it feels in your body. And then ask the simple question, do I want more of this feeling? If the answer is yes, then the next question is, well, what kind of things in my daily life make me feel that way? And then you move towards doing those things.
Yeah.
And then you each time, like you said, thank you very much for putting that out there. Each time notice it, because then your consciousness begins to look for that. It begins to look for that kind of synchronicity. For instance, I'll have my clients do an exercise where they get a gift or a symbol that is powerful for them. Sometimes some people get an animal, a totem. And then in that next week, they'll read about it, they'll see it, they'll get a poster with it, or a postage stamp, or there's a magazine article about it, they see a TV thing about it, and boom, 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 it's like the universe is going bing, 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 bing. And the client will come back and say, you won't believe this. Remember how I said my totem animal was a swan? Well, I've seen swans. I went for a walk, I saw a swan. My friend sent me something with a swan. And so it begins to become amplified. And even people who may be a bit skeptical about this kind of synchronicity, I just say, try it out. You've got nothing to lose. Nothing to lose. And then once you start stepping in this direction, it's like, when you know how to drive, but learning to fly, there are other rules. You can't fly a plane using the rules of driving a car. Some of the things are the same, but it's the same thing for synchronicity or synergy or vibration. There are different rules, and we have to be willing to explore those rules and those conversations to discover our own wingspan in terms of creating our lives and creating magic, creating meaning. It means we have to learn new things.
I love this.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate how you grounded it in something very, very simple of just starting to pay more attention in your own life of those moments when you're feeling joy or having a moment of awe or just delighted by something and not letting it pass you by, noticing how it makes you feel, asking yourself, do I want more of this? And then what could I consciously do then to create more of that in my life?
Exactly.
So that's a great roadmap, very practical roadmap.
Mm-hmm. And to recognize that just as we learn through study of engineering, study of mathematics, there is a whole field of study and learning to be had when it comes to what we are capable of. Our imagination, nobody knows what that is. Nobody knows how it occurs or what its power or potential is. And I would say that our imagination, the ability to visualize, these are the muscles that we want to begin to exercise to increase our stamina for creating the lives that we want.
I want to segue into, so one of the other values I have as I'm creating Mother's Quest is I really want to change the conversation with moms from feeling like I'm either a present mom and I'm focused on my kids, or I'm living the life and going after my own goals and dreams and feeling like they have to choose one or the other, because I really believe, and I think there's a lot of evidence and people starting to write about this, or probably are lots of studies that have already been written about the power of your children receiving and growing from the example they see you set and not just the words that you say. And so we have this desire for our kids to reach their fullest potential, but we don't realize sometimes that the best way to do that may actually be to be doing that ourselves.
Yes.
So I'm very curious what you're living this way you think is giving to your son, Leo.
Yeah. Well, let me begin by saying that I completely know that feeling of being completely devoted to my son and also feeling that desire to make an impact in the world. And so I've had 8 years of juggling, exploring, diving into this inquiry with full consciousness. And one of the things, sometimes I would be so about the kid and making sure that he had my attention and so on and so forth. And the other part of me would say, but you've got so many things you want to do and you need to give that attention. And so back and forth and back and forth. And what I have learned pretty recently, I have to say, is that it's where I was coming from. And what I mean by that is that I realize that if I come from scarcity consciousness, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough energy, I don't have enough money, if I'm coming from scarcity, whether it's to give attention to my child or to my life purpose and what I want to do, it's not going to generate what I want it to generate. Because the bigger purpose for me is not to be squeezing. I don't want to squeeze. I don't want to squeeze when I'm being with my kid because I'm thinking about my other stuff. And I don't want to be squeezing about my kid when I'm doing my life purpose stuff. And so it was a squeezing.
Can I ask you a quick question? Can you define what you mean when you say squeeze?
Well, it's that feeling you get when you go into survival mode and we're like in that adrenaline rush, rush to get things done, rush to be the full-on mom, smiling, happy, and then at the end of the day, you're so exhausted, you don't have time or energy for anything. It's this sense of like, you're not making it. And you're not making it as a mom, you're not making it as a life purpose fulfilled person. Like for me, I want to make film, and I'm 48 years old. Why haven't I started writing my screenplays? I have all these ideas, I've got all these things down. So it was this really intense fear that I wasn't going to get to do any of these things well. And that feeling of failure and that stress of squeezing, pushing, rushing was frying me. It was fatiguing me. It was making me feel not engaged with my life. It was not the values, the thing that I truly believe, which is that everything is fine. We are here to be and enjoy and not be squeezing. So that's where the conversation began to unfold for me, was that I did not want to operate from a place of squeezing, either with my kid or with my life purpose stuff. And I just started saying, you know what, I have time. If that movie doesn't get made, big deal. I'm engaged in this moment, and this moment is so rich, so purpose-filled, so light, that I'm happy here. Yeah. I decided that I didn't want to be a person waiting to experience her joy, her happiness until she was retired, or when she received her first Oscar, or any of that. All of that just kind of fell away when I realized on a daily basis the cost of that squeezing. Yeah. To me, to my body, to my emotions, to my spirit. And I was like, you know what? I surrender. I give up. I'm not going to go for those goals, that kind of being a parent in that way anymore. And so one of the practices that I began to include in my life is to just see, if I start squeezing, I'm not allowed to do anything until that I stop that squeezing.
So what do? You just press pause on any actions, anything on your to-do list?
Yep, exactly. Because it's not, why is that important for me? Because I truly have experienced what abundance feels like. And abundance is a much better place to start something from than from a place of scarcity. Yeah. So the abundance, to connect to that, it doesn't take very much. It isn't dollar amount. I know people with a lot of dollars in their bank accounts, a lot of prestige, a lot of influence, who don't feel abundant. And I also know people who have very little in their bank accounts, don't know anybody, have very little influence, and they don't feel abundant. So the feeling of abundance has nothing to do with outside things. It does to a degree, of course, if your life is in threat and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. But generally speaking, for most of us, it isn't outside of us. It's actually a conversation. It needs a transformation in our way of thinking and being. And that transformation, one of the steps is to stop squeezing, stop rushing.
I'm taking a deep breath with that one as I take it in.
Right, to take a deep breath. One of the things that I will do, and many people know this way of being, is, to do a little tapping. They'll do a little tapping on the thymus.
Okay, so I've heard about this tapping thing, but I've never done it. So give me the very quick summary of what is tapping.
So basically, the reason that I think that it works is because it activates the parasympathetic nervous system.
So there's science behind this?
Yes. So what happens is that when we are in a rush, when we've got all that adrenaline going, I've got to get to the post office, I've got to pick up the kids, I haven't made dinner yet. That's our mental conversation, but the physical body is responding to all that stuff through adrenaline. Pump, got to get it done. Survival. And so that creates the squeezing, because when we're in survival mode, all the body's resources are brought into the core of the body to make sure that you live. So if you lose a leg, you can still survive. So all that blood, everything is just in the core of your body, because it needs that, and your brain, to survive. It doesn't need a hand. It can do without a foot. But the core, the main organs, principal organs, it cannot live with. So all of that blood comes back there. And so you're living in this intense adrenal state. So to stop the body from being in that intense adrenal state, for instance, if you just now take both your hands, what I'm doing is not the classic tapping. This is the tapping that I do. You take both your hands on either side of your, just underneath your collarbones, your clavicles. Just do tap, 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 3 times each. Tap, 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 tap.
Wait, which finger do you use? Your whole hand?
I'm just using like my index, middle finger, ring finger, just holding my palm flat on my chest, and just tap, 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 tap. And so what we're doing there is that we are allowing the parasympathetic nervous system to become activated, and it's saying everything is okay. You can relax now.
Wow, what a simple thing.
It's an amazing thing.
Such an amazing impact.
And you just do it. And if you just kind of slow down and begin to listen to that tap, 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 and feel that you might have a feeling of wanting to yawn or close your eyes for a moment, just give yourself that break, and it isn't long.
Yeah. It was a cool thing to have in your back pocket.
Yeah. So just doing that will reconnect you to safety. It will connect you to abundance. Everything is fine. And, we have plenty of time. I think time is one of those resources that we are the most afraid of sometimes, running out of time, because the post office is going to close. I need to get this email list thing out today. It puts us in this intense experience of life that we can't even see life. It's just a blur. Our children's faces are a blur. We know they're there. We know we love them, but we don't have time to feel it. We don't have time to be in it. And so just doing this simple little exercise will give you a little moment to be with yourself and to actually experience life versus just whizzing through life.
I'm really grateful that I had this conversation with you today, and that it's the first of all of the episodes, because I think, in other interviews, I may get into more nuts and bolts with different moms about the things they're creating in the world and how they went about doing it. But I'm more and more realizing that mindset, and just the energy that you bring matters probably more than anything else.
Yes.
So it feels like this is the first building block.
Yes.
Foundation.
Yes. Well, I think you've probably seen this in your own life, how a transformation in your thinking has completely created new space, more bandwidth for you. So it could be a momentary insight about, like you were saying with your son, when he comes to you rushing with those big joy and open arms, and you reflect right back, just that moment of knowing that creates this whole world that you and your child can have now, because you saw that, you took time to have that insight and to put it into practice. And I think that there are so many areas in our lives where a transformation in our thinking can change our experience from being in a very low-hanging cave to experiencing a world that we step out into, and there's a blue sky, there's sunshine, and we can walk tall. And that is all about a transformation in our thinking.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
So before we do my last closing, wrapping up the conversation, I wanted just to give you a chance to name what that film is inside of you that I feel faith you will one day create it when it's the right time, without the pressure. But what is that story that you want to tell?
It's so interesting. I am completely in love with sci-fi, because I feel that sci-fi allows people to come to their own conclusions about what is possible, what isn't, but it's a framework through which I can present some of my ideas about some of my own experiences, like you were saying about my childhood, were they past lives, what was going on. So there's things that happened in my life that are outside the norm, that I have experience. That's all I can say about it. That include the outer regions of space and outer regions of our consciousness, and how I've learned some things through night school, what I call night school, through engaging with beings who taught me stuff and made me aware of certain things. So it's about my story. It's about my birth and my choices to be here, but told through a story, a science fiction type story that will expand 10,000 years.
Oh my goodness.
And it's called, the working title of it for the whole, it's like a trilogy, is called The Unfolding Harmony.
Well, I look forward to the day when I will get to hear that story and have some of my questions about this answered.
Well, hopefully you'll get to go watch it. And I will be there receiving my...
I can picture it. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the last thing I wanted to ask you, if there was any particular gift or parting words of wisdom for me or for anybody else listening as we're continuing to move down our path for an epic life. And if there's anything tangible too that you want us to access, we can include that in the show links.
Sure, yes. I would say that all of us want to have an epic life, and that an epic life is a breath away, a kiss away, right? It's right here. So how do we connect from wherever we are feeling, whether that's, buried knee deep in our workload, or where we're feeling like we're so far away because of the things we have to do, we don't have the resources that we need, is there is a way to begin to connect to that. And I created a series of meditation exercises and a little workbook for clients and people who come to my website that is called Start Your Day, Launch Your Life. And I created that because I wanted to help people have that, just to have it. Maybe they can afford to work with me, maybe they can't, maybe they don't have the time, whatever it is. But I wanted to create a product that people could just have. And it would be a way to be able to get out of bed in the morning, or it would be equally applicable if you're going to launch something big. I'm going to change my career. I want to create this product. What were the steps that I took to kind of get into that mindset? So that's what this little product that I would like to offer your listeners is called Start Your Day, Launch Your Life. It's 4 exercises, starting with getting unstuck, becoming clear, connecting to confidence, and then taking action. Because those are the 4 steps that I apply in my life. The first is just getting unstuck, just acknowledging I'm in blah, I don't care, I don't want to get out of bed, I don't know what to do, I'm just, that energy is just like, what do you do with that energy? And that tapping that we talked about is part of that getting unstuck energy.
It sounds like an amazing resource, and I'm definitely going to go and download it myself. So I'll put the link to your website, but can you also say out loud what your site is?
Yes, of course. So my website is TenderLogic, TenderLogic, tenderlogic.com. And I happily work with clients who are ready to have that transformation in thinking, who are wanting to heal things that are blocking their self-expression to having an epic life. So if anybody would like to work with me, they can contact me through my website, and it would be a pleasure to connect with them.
Thank you so much. So I've been a facilitator of a process for years that we call reflection. And also in my coaching, I've learned that I don't feel complete until we have a little moment of acknowledgement. So I wanted to acknowledge you and then just give you a moment to say anything you want to say to feel complete from this conversation, anything you want to take away. So I want to acknowledge what a generous person you are for taking this time and even more time before this conversation to be open to sharing your wisdom and your stories. And I love your positivity and the joy and the magic in which you approach your life. And it's evident how much you bring that to your son. So thank you so much.
Thank you for that. And I took every word and feeling you extended to me into my heart. And if you could see me now, you'd see me grinning from side to side. I wanted to say thank you to you too, Julie, because when I hear your voice and where you're coming from, it just lights me up. And I appreciate that leap of faith that you're having in creating this podcast. And just to say what a delightful person you are. I just love that. And I love you.
Thank you so much. Well, I hope that we will stay connected and that maybe you'll be a listener.
I will.
And there'll be some part 2 to this conversation in future Mother's Quest podcast seasons. So thank you so much again, Navjit, and have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye, Julie.
Bye.
Thank you so much for coming along with me on this episode of the Mother's Quest podcast. I hope this conversation sparked something that will help you live your epic life. If you'd like to get show notes and learn more about how to join the Mother's Quest community, head over to mothersquest.com. And while you're there, I would love it if you would follow the prompts to subscribe, leave a review on iTunes, and help us spread the word. I want to end with some words to light the way on your quest. Seize the day, love your people, honor your gifts. Until next time.